that's my my thoughts on his letters. I mean, it's I think, apparently David Brooks was trying to say that we need something like mixing, like real actual mixing and gazing. He even said apparently gazing upon the other and the others of status. And you hear that at Northwest Estuary, people were, get real people looking upon them and what we do here online. And it was, a powerful critique. And I hope it surfaces in more ways and gets around more. I don't have a lot of thrust, but I decided to put it out there too.
So question people have been asking, and I don't know the answer to. Did you need an invitation to go to ARC?
That was Peterson. They did like a, I think they did around 1,000 tickets were open.
Oh, I did not know that. Okay.
Because Jordan Peterson did like a video where he invited other people. There was like an open. Yeah.
I don't know if I would have gone, but I would have thought about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
David Brooks, I think Jordan Peterson obviously wanted someone critical there. I think having the person who admitted he is the chief rabbi of Mecca there, apparently somebody yelled traitor, which makes sense. The man is treacherous. They obviously didn't advertise enough, because I think if they had, frankly, I would have I would have raised money to get Chezi to go. I think Chezi, having been there, would have been good. And
yeah, that would have been awesome.
Yeah. But David Brooks is a horrible excuse for a human being. He is, so in the Middle Ages, there was this thing called the court Jew, which was royal courts would pick a Jew who was their Jew to do Jewish things, right? And it was a lucrative position for someone who was willing to do the bidding of the king, right? And all the Jews hated this guy, right? And that's, every time I hear David Brooks talk, that's exactly the type of thing he does. He goes on PBS.
Is it me roboting or is it you guys roboting?
I'm not roboting, but I'm not saying you roboting either.
Jacob sounds mostly fine to me.
He just froze on my end.
No, he's good. It's you, Ben.
Yeah, it was me. Sorry, I didn't hear the last of that, Jacob.
So he goes on, and he goes on PBS. He goes to the New York Times, and he says all the polite things that the liberals, leftists, whatever you want to call them, want to hear from a conservative. He never actually makes good points like Scott Jennings does, right? He never actually says the things that people who are actually conservative would say, because he knows better than to say those things. And so, like, to bring a man like him over to tell liberal talking points while pretending to be leftist, it's the opposite of speaking truth to power. It's the opposite of being inclusive of other voices. I think Brooks was a horrible choice, despite the fact I really do think it's a great idea to have people who are critical, people who are anti-Trump. Yeah, Bring people who are anti-Trump, but someone who's so dishonest. And I don't think I think if you pay attention to Brooks enough, you see he is very honest about his dishonesty. He will at times say, "Yeah, I can't say that because I work at the New York Times," etc., etc., etc. It's Neil. It's called Christian because of Baxter.
It's always the play on words.
I call when I stream from other people, I just call whatever their name is. I guess I should have said Christian Baxter here. I guess I could change it to Christian Baxter.
Oh yeah, you better. You're going to get confused for one of those dirty Christians, Jacob. I don't know enough about David Brooks. I think I watched him on Chris Williamson's podcast earlier this year. You know, I think he was selling a book or something, but you know, I just don't have enough nuance and to really have an opinion. All I can go on is what CW is experiencing. Did you catch the open letter or read it or hear what I was saying on that?
But no.
Yeah, so right before you popped on, CW wrote an open letter to David Brooks after hearing his speech at ARC, and he put it on his blog.
He didn't send it to me. Thanks a lot, CW.
Well, yeah, and he's basically saying,
I wonder why.
CW sends me stuff all the time.
He's basically saying that what David Brooks is saying he's not doing, Paul Vanderklay and such are doing in this corner, is people are having real conversation because CW left his kind of fundamentalist Presbyterian church to go to the liberal Presbyterian church, hoping to find his people, but it's also like mixed with the elites. And he even said David Brooks has visited his church before, and he was in a small group conversation, and he was saying, well, no one really listens to me because I didn't go to fucking Princeton. And then one of the sweet church ladies were like, you could go to Princeton. And he's just like, oh my gosh, like,
oh, okay. I think I talked. Yes, CW did send me this, and I said to him, I think you misunderstand what's going on.
Well, maybe. I mean, I think it's just from his perspective that there are limits to what you can do to get. And then like he goes into this place that's supposed to be considered more inclusive as, a liberal mainline denomination. And he, being himself kind of in a, one of the alphabet people. And it's like, well, then you should be interested to talk to me. But instead it's this non-elite pastor from Sacramento that's willing to give me time and give 500 people his time to talk about things. And so I don't know. And that was his critique, is you can preach about this ideal that you think that should be happening in society, but you don't realize it already is happening.
Okay, so I found, CW did send me that a week ago, and I'm going to put a link to his thing. Oh, but that's not going to go to your channel, but you can take it from and put it if you want on your channel. But on my channel, it's linked. And what I did was I sent him a discussion between Roland Fryer and Barry Weiss from a while back at University of Austin. And I wrote, you misunderstand CW, you misunderstand completely. You misunderstand why you are not accepted. It is, of course, rooted in Protestantism. When you lie to people constantly, you should not be surprised it is a world of lies. And I'll explain what I mean by that. In Protestantism, everyone's supposed to be equal and everyone's supposed to have a chance. But, of course, people don't, like, that's not how the world functions, right? Not everybody can do everything. And everybody knows that. So when you lie to people and you constantly say to them, anybody can, then you end up with these hierarchies that are implicit, not explicit.
Well, there's something about dignity versus like ability, like that everyone has inherent dignity, but not everyone has the same ability. And I don't think that I wouldn't say that's a lie. I think that that's also taught in Protestant circles, that people have, inherently valuable dignity. But I think sometimes it's hard, in Christian circles to say that, to talk about merit and those types of things and status, because the ground is level at the foot of the cross would be the true reality of that everyone falls short of a standard, the standard or something. So, but there's that side where I think it's definitely either, if it's not implied, like you're saying, it's not really acknowledged well, which is that, we want hierarchy, we want, a leader, we want those things to be real. And the question is, how explicit do you make that? That is, then becomes the question, and how much of it is then forced, and how much of it is then enforced, and how much of it is, and I tend to think there's not a perfect answer to that this side of glory, but So.
Yeah, there's no perfect answer to it. And I mean, I have to say, just because Anselman pointed it out, as I have many, many times, when we talk about Protestantism, right, we're talking about those things that were unique to the Protestant Reformation that haven't been accepted globally, which I would say 80% of the things in the Protestant Reformation were actually. You want to highlight Marcus's thing? Jacob, I think your point is good, but but it also gets a bit more complicated. Protestants often have a very strong inclination that Catholics, the most explicit and focal rules hierarchy.
So we could get lost in this conversation that has been well conversed and argued over in this corner of the internet, or we could go back to talking about your experience on from taking in art content now that over the last week, or week or so that it's come out. We could.
My experience has been there wasn't enough hierarchy
at art. Okay, I see. Well, that's good. But let's aim it, let's aim it a little bit to now, because we can talk about the problems of the past, that get discussed a lot. But this is kind of in the current frame. Like, so I happen to think, as I stewed on this a little bit more, that in a certain way, it could be that Peterson kind of is actually doing a little bit more of what Paul Vanderklay does.
What do you mean?
The ark was an estuary.
Paul didn't think so.
I know, but after looking at all the different perspectives, reading people from the dissident right that were there, seeing people, the classical liberals like Rubin talk, seeing, the vantage from the corner that I kind of, embodied a little bit, and looking at the booths that were there, and then some of the random people that I had there was a broad thing that it was like, let's put all these people, let's get them together and see what happens, instead of let's get them together and then I'm going to tell you exactly how this is going to work in the world.
Okay, this is what I was actually wondering. Did they? You mentioned booths. So did they have a vendor area with booths and stuff?
Yeah.
Okay. Who was there?
Well, if you'd watched my vlog, you would have seen many of the ones I walked through.
Well, half of your vlogs are behind members only stuff.
No, they're not. No, they're not. They're all on the playlist. So here's the thing. The thing that shocked me the most was that the very first big, when you walk in, was focused on the family, and Chuck Colson had a big booth. Okay. That shocked me.
Why?
Focus on the Family was not who I expected to see when I walked through the doors. I just they're just deeply they would have never touched Jordan Peterson with a 10-foot pole 5 years ago. Is what I'm trying.
What makes you say that?
Because he isn't saying that he's a born again Christian.
But they're evangelizing.
Maybe, but you have to believe that the relationship that you're evangelizing with is one that is relatively. I'm saying that I only think within the last year or two that would have actually happened. That's my opinion, because I don't think Jordan Peterson had broad evangelical appeal before 2 years ago.
I don't think that's true.
Well, the only quasi evangelical person that was trying to contend with his ideas for like 3 or 4 years was Paul Vanderklay.
What do you think, Teo?
You're giving Paul too much credit.
Okay.
Not the only.
I'm saying that weren't just like
is right there. Jordan Peterson was very. It was well examined by the evangelical, and it's now they might come to different conclusions now than they did 5 years ago, but they definitely were aware of his ideas and they were.
Oh yeah, I'm sure they were aware. I'm just
and interacting with it, not to the extent of what Paul did. Now, no one he made too many videos on Jordan Peterson.
Glenn Scrivener was one of the first people to platform Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
Well, Glenn Scrivener. I'm sorry. I meant Justin Briley.
Justin Briley.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, we're talking about it. He's an Anglican. I guess what I'm saying is like.
Oh, so an Anglican isn't.
He's an Anglican, egalitarian, and I'm talking focused on the family is very conservative.
Yeah,
very.
They've been involved in conservative politics forever, and they engage with Jewish stuff.
Okay, well,
and Mormons. They're very involved with Mormons, as far as I know.
Well, that's news to me. So I see focused on the family as kind of very in the past, maybe, and that's what I think. I think that only in the last 3 to 5 years that they would have been more broad, is what I'm trying to say. I guess maybe not politically, but that's just my opinion. I don't know. I don't have a lot of things to base that on, just other than how they have been in my salience since the 80s. So
So one of the things.
Go ahead, Taya.
No, go for it. I was going.
When did Jordan Peterson come on your map, Christian?
16, 17.
Okay.
And yeah, and I, as a very evangelical person, like the first time I even broached having a good conversation with somebody who is broad theologically, I said, what were your thoughts on Peterson? And the answer I got was, oh, that heretic? That was and that was probably in 18. And so that's what I mean by being interested, because whenever I was at Symbolic World and Ruslan shows up, that was also the kind of thing that I had that is a signal that evangelicalism is ready to partner with Peterson in a public facing way.
Ruslan's another one that's been commentating on Peterson for a while, for a long time.
Yeah,
as well.
But as a critic or as a part, like as someone he saw as.
Ruslan doesn't criticize anyone. He loves everybody.
You haven't seen him criticizing the Jewish anti-missionaries, apparently. I still don't think any Protestants really view. Maybe Paul views Peterson as somewhat of an ally, but I think even Paul doesn't view Peterson as an ally. I don't think evangelicals really view Peterson as an ally.
I think they do now.
Really?
Yeah.
Ally, yes, absolutely.
And what do you say? What's up, Luke? You got thoughts?
Hey, what's up? Good to see you, Christian.
Too, man.
And hey, Tayo and Jacob. I don't know if we've been on the stream together, but hey, guys. Yeah, sorry. I was kind of listening to the beginning of this while I was putting our babies down, and then so I didn't catch the last 10 minutes. I'm not exactly sure where the conversation went since then, but yeah, my general sense, I'm interested in getting your input, Christian, since you're actually there. Is seems like Arc just kind of has laid the groundwork or kind of provide a setting for connections to take place for the new thing to be born. Like to me, it became very clear watching coverage of Arc this year that Arc is not the future, but it just seems like a lot of the connections that were made during Arc are kind of building the future. Um, and to me, I mean, the segment that I feel like I'm most curious about is like the post liberal Christian element at Arc. Uh, but anyway, that's kind of my thought.
What is the post-liberal? Who would you put in the post-liberal camp, Luke?
Like Aaron McIntyre, David Green wasn't there, but like the distributist David Green. But then I mean, Sargon of Akkad is kind of I don't, he recently converted. I don't know. Mary Harrington definitely has her finger on the pulse. Jonathan Pageau. Um, but in general, like there's this kind of post-liberal movement that was there at ARC, not really represented on stage. But to me, we're kind of entering an era after liberalism, and ARC seems to represent the folks who succeeded under liberalism, trying to defend the system that gave them power. But I think that system's crumbling. That tower is coming down. For reasons we've talked about. The internet, the disruption of hierarchies. Anyway, that's my thought.
Yeah, I think that what I was thinking about today or yesterday is I'm looking at the commentary on ARC. And this kind of comes from the point of I don't remember who was having the conversation, that it may have been Jacob, where the media, the right media doesn't have anything to talk, or no, the blue media doesn't have anything to talk about because there's like a lost sense of the thread or something like that. And what Luke's what I was thinking about is I'm watching, the Lotus Eaters, and there's people writing about ARC, and there's people that are commentating about it that have followings and stuff like that. They're those voices weren't, as present, I guess, except for more of the institutional ones, which, I mean, there's some love in the comments about Mary Harrington, but that's the what's her Unheard is, a media publication, and they were very strongly represented at ARC as a voice. Would you put them in a post-liberal category, or just like part of the liberal ethos continuing on?
I think Unheard has been hosting some really interesting conversations with post-liberals, like Curtis Yarvin. And then they recently did I forget what they call it. They're, like dinner social club, an Unheard club with, and I'm blanking on his name, but he's a Substack writer who is talking about the return of the strong gods. So I think Unheard, they kind of have their feet in both worlds. They kind of have a foot in liberalism, but then also they're platforming a lot of very interesting post-liberals. So that seems to be their role.
Chris, what's up? What are you thinking about?
I just had a quick question for you. If you said you thought it was kind of a Jordan Peterson-ish, estuary-ish thing, so was there a topic? Was there a conclusion? Does that give it a different kind of way to look at it?
I mean, the thing that I think they couldn't see from my perspective was just, or they were, I don't know if they were, they think about a lot of things. I'm just a dude. They were either purposely suppressing specific identity, or they couldn't see that it was actually needed as an important part of the conference. And that was what Sargon was kind of talking about. Winston Marshall, they were saying, you have a conference in England, it might, or in London, it might be okay to just like flash a little bit of English, like culture to be present. I actually think that would have been an important thing to symbolize, but they talked about it, but there wasn't any kind of visible representation of that. Other than that, it was there, but I didn't feel like I felt like I was still in Nashville. So.
Then leave the Excel Center and go into Croydon.
Well, I didn't have time to do that when I was trying to, whatever. And I don't even know. I wouldn't even know where to go because I'm, just a dude from Arkansas who was just trying to get there and work his camera.
Well, you had the mushy peas, so you participated a little bit.
Oh yeah, and at the Chili's in the airport. Yeah. So yeah, but I do think that it was, in a meta sense, it kind of was a little bit estuarial in the very nature of it. But Paul's critique is that there wasn't a layer to capitalize on that as well as he could have. And his initial wild frustration with the opening networking meeting, where I was in there, and they were literally like hushing everybody to listen to another 30 or 45 minutes of speeches while we were supposed to be in a mixer. And I think that just really got under Paul's crawl. Like, if you're not even going to let us do that very thing, so that is that layer.
So
I'm curious. Go ahead, Teo.
No, go for it, Luke.
Okay. I was just going to say, I'm curious if ARC really wants to provide a platform for the future that's coming. Just the way the conference was organized, it seems like what they're doing, they're just kind of ramming these defenders of the liberal world order, like they're ramming that down people's throats, trying to just hold up the scaffolding, like I was saying, of this tower that's crumbling. So I wonder if that was an intentional move, not allowing for more of that.
I do think,
I don't know.
Peterson's initial thing was he's hoping for a coalition between traditionals and liberals, or conservatives and liberals, and that whatever that coalition is the ARC. But the question is, what is that, and was that represented? Maybe, I don't know. And we're definitely not coming at it from whatever elite perspective that you would see this thing from, and that would be interesting. Interesting, because even people like Sargon and he doesn't represent really the elite, or anything like that. What's up, Grim?
Hi. What was that part with Peter Thiel's head all big?
That was the initial conversation about AI. That was how they started the conversation. And yeah, it was very reminiscent of this Bill Gates, Steve Jobs image from the 80s. I don't know. Did you watch that video, Pirates of Silicon Valley, back in the 90s with Noah Wiley? Did you see that on TNT? Come on, Grim. No? It was a good one.
No, because so who is that, right? Who is this giant head in front of these 4,000 people? Why are there 4,000 people? Why is Christian Baxter there? And so they kept saying 4,000 people, and I know that to be one of those people, you had to have 5,000 pounds. So how many pounds is that? 4,000 times 5,000 pounds they made. And I think, and it seemed to me that the reason that they opened up those seats to sell was because not enough people who were invited said they did their RSVPs, and they were like, "Oh, we better do something to get some more scrubs up in here." And so it did seem like maybe it was a service to give liberal people an opportunity to switch sides as the tides are turning, for the rats leaving a sinking ship, come aboard the ARC. It could have been some of that. I would really like to get Jordan Hall's take on it. Don't you know him?
Jordan, yeah. Well, his good job, Grim. I know Jordan Hall's experience was that he didn't go to a single plenary session, and that his most recent conversation I saw was before he left for ARC was about the Commons, and he just hung out in the common area. So, I don't think, if he didn't think there was anything interesting to be said from the stage, that there's nothing, he thinks the most important thing is who you can meet and what you can build with the people that you meet. And I think Paul was making a similar critique. What does Mark say? Jordan Hall is the most likely to do anything. Well, yeah, he moved to us. I mean, follow his story.
Yeah,
I forgot to unmute myself. I wanted to ask Luke, why specifically did you think that Ark is not the future?
That's a really good question. I think in a lot of ways, what Jordan Peterson and kind of the art contingency has been doing is trying to fight back postmodernism. But I think postmodernism is more of a result of technological change and kind of the cultural disruption that has happened because of that. And I think the only way forward is to digest postmodernism. And I feel like the post-liberal right has done that. And what I see ARC is doing is, keeping their hand out, like, no, postmodernism, no. But, the way these things go, I mean, these are inevitable. You can't stop change when it's washing over you. So I think that's more my perspective. It's more an inevitability of cultural change. And ARC, I don't think they're really accepting what's happening. They're just trying to resist it. So I think that's more my critique.
Yeah, there was a bit of we're still the intellectual dark web fighting postmodernism. I think there was still a bit of that as the thing. I don't know what Grim's talking about here. You should play the best thing from ARC sometime in this stream, Bax. I'll come back to it. Yeah, I think there was a bit of that, like you're saying, Luke. The question I have for like the dissident right is that in some ways, my critique of it is that it's playing the same game that postmodernism was playing in regards to power, and I think that's where the letting change wash over you is a question of well, is this really change? I don't know. I don't have the answers to that. There's just some of that baking in the back of my mind about the dissident right being as obsessed with power dynamics as the left, the postmodern Marxist,
Yeah, I think that obsession with power just comes from recognizing that the centers of power are changing. And so I think you don't have to think about power when you can just take for granted who has the power. But once that dynamic shifts, then it makes you think critically about where does power come from? Where does power flow? Who has the power? How do centers of power change? So I feel like I think that's why you're seeing that kind of postmodern obsession with power on both the left and the right. I think they're both noticing the same thing, which, I mean, Christian, you talk about this all the time, how, the internet has collapsed these hierarchies. So, those, let's say the, mainstream media corporations that could control the narrative, they're no longer controlling the narrative. So that is a disruption of the power structure. So but I know what you mean. It seems kind of like there's a way in which it feels a little icky to focus so much on power. But
yeah, I mean, it leads me to the inversion of power on the cross as a Christian. That's kind of where that conversation always seems to land for me. And I don't know, even though there are things I like about the critiques coming from the right in some ways. So, yeah. Other thoughts? I'm trying to look at some comments here. There's a lot of comments flowing. Yay, thank you, Luke. And I'm not even Orthodox. All right.
Yeah, because the Orthodox really are all about inversion of power.
Oh, we saw that we had Father DeYoung in the comments early coming in from your stream, Jacob.
Father DeYoung's here?
Yeah, he said he was invited but did not go. Yeah, there he is. That's him, right?
That is him.
I did see Father Stephen Damick there. He was meeting a bunch of folks from like Symbolic World and different people.
Well, Father Stephen DeYoung has been live streaming. Well, not live streaming, uploading videos of him playing Marvel Heroes a lot. I don't know if you guys have been following that, but it's been making a huge splash in the Orthodox world.
Is Twitch streaming from a priest?
Basically, yes.
That's
Is that what evangelical is?
yeah.
Orthodox priest streaming on Twitch.
Yeah, it's part of it. I think it's part of it because what does that?
I just got to work, so I've got to hop off. But
all right, dude.
Thanks, Luke.
I do want to say I feel like there's
No.
He had to say, and then boom.
Maybe my connection got lost. So
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
What-
Well,
anyway,
what did
I'll
you have
hop
to say?
off.
No,
I'll see
what
you
were you
guys
gonna
later.
say?
No.
We missed it. What were you gonna say? No,
Okay.
maybe he doesn't have
I'll say it. All of you guys sound like robots. I'll just say it, and then anyway, if you guys
No. We keep trying.
one of those conversations is the more spiritual conversation about how does one
He tried.
Put the car in reverse. Go back on.
Okay,
Turn off your video.
am I back?
Yes, turn off your video. Just speak. Turn off your
Kill video.
Yeah.
Okay, can you guys hear me better now?
Yes.
Well,
Anyway,
maybe.
I'm sorry. I'll just like leave a comment, I guess.
All right, man.
Unless you can hear me now.
We can hear
We
you.
can hear you.
Famous last words.
Okay. Yeah, well, I feel like there are two conversations happening about power. One is this kind of a spiritual conversation, and how does one relate to power as a follower of a Christ? How does Christ relate to power? And I feel like that's very different than a political conversation when it comes to power, because if you're interested in the the political side of things, you have to deal with power.
And if you're in the religious side of things, you also have to deal with it.
Working in the political
that thought.
space.
Yeah, if you're in the political space, you have to deal with power. And if you're
Yeah, if you're in the political space, you have to deal with power. You can't just reject power. But if you don't want to be in the political sphere and it's just about your personal devotion, that's fine. So anyway, those seem like it seems like two different conversations happening at once when it comes to power.
See, this
All right. Well, it's been great. I'll sign off.
real quick, Luke and I had a podcast yesterday, and it'll come out next week. Keep going.
I think he makes an incredibly great point. Unfortunately, I think the point he makes is that he's bought into a very Gnostic sort of Christianity, right? And you can certainly have a Gnostic interpretation of Christianity where the spiritual is divorced from the actual material, real world. But more than anything, Jesus preached about the coming of the kingdom of God. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And so this idea of not caring about power, Father Stephen, I would love to actually hear what Father Stephen has to say about all this stuff, but apparently he's listening in the car. This idea that you can be a Christian without caring about power, without caring about the powerless, really, right? So, like the end of Matthew, I think it's just a very bad interpretation of Christianity that hasn't worked ever and does not represent the vast majority of Christian history or Christian society.
What I would say to that is, I think you're right, because I kind of have contended with a type of Gnostic relationship with my faith previous. And this guy up here that we sometimes talk about in this corner of the internet is Jordan Peterson. And I think that this is where he tries to thread this question with regards to power, is that it is most truly well positioned in a relationship to sacrifice, and that is the right relationship with power, and that if you have it, that the way to best position yourself is to be willing to sacrifice it, and in return there's actually greater power in that reality.
I'm going to say first, please define power instead of asking questions, Neil. Second, how about we go with what Jesus said, which is he who wants to be a leader should not be like the Gentiles, but rather should in fact be a servant. And the proper use of power to serve is actually what Jesus taught, as opposed to what I would say Gnostic Christianity teaches.
Yeah.
Gnostic.
Andrew loves Gnosticism a little bit too much.
I'm the only person that actually did my homework on Gnosticism before calling everyone and anything Gnostic. Who would have thought?
I don't call anyone and anything a Gnostic. I think Gnosticism, and I think this is the proper definition of Gnosticism, at least how we use it today, is separating the world in which we live from the spiritual world. And the fact is, I sincerely believe that the world in which we live is a representation and an extension of spiritual realities.
But you equated that to the political and equated the spiritual to the...
Everything in the material world is a representation of spiritual realities.
Yeah, but the comps was Christian was saying that you can separate politics and spiritual. I think it was whoever was saying it, and you call that Gnostic because you're saying that means that you're nuts. You don't think the political. Yeah, you call that Gnostic, meaning you think the political is material and the spiritual is non-material.
Well,
so you
hold on. Okay, let's define. I mean, this discussion we're having. If I remember correctly, Luke said power is something that exists in the the political world, but not in the spiritual world. He said the conversation about power is something that is in politics, but not in spiritual.
I think what I took him to be saying was more so what PVK says when he says politics is saying something and religion is dollar, meaning he's saying that the conversation of power is being had at the political level when a better level to have the conversation would be the spiritual level.
Okay, so if that's what you're saying, which is that the politics is now and religion is always, which is what Paul van der Klee says, I agree with that 100%. That politics is cents and religion is dollars, but dollars are made up of cents. Dollars are not completely and always includes now.
Here's my thought on it. I think part of the tension, at least within Western and specifically American, and this will go back to the conversation about Protestantism for Jacob too, but is this, Charles Taylor's and Tim Keller spoke to this as well, is that we were tricked into thinking that politics were secular, that they were separate from, and that you could talk about political things, but yet, that's just, leave your religion at home, and that's fine. But the politic thing, that's not religion. And what's ended up happening is all the morals got once the hegemony of WASPy Catholic, Jewish, religious stuff broke down in, post 1950, all the morals then to begin to get thrust into the politic, because no longer was there some kind of moral hegemonic moral reality for Western culture or American culture. And so then it's like, well, what are we dealing with now? Now morals are all basically wrapped up in the politic, because we're no longer existing in a somewhat shared morality underneath it. And so I think that's what's happened, and that's why there's a very big confusion about the conversation even related to power, because and where do these things exist separately, or are they different places and whatnot? I'm not one that says that there's a separation necessarily. I do think that for cohesion, that you have to transcend the political to be able to cohere. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist within the stack of reality. So I don't know. Those are just some of my thoughts on it. What's up, Michael?
Yeah, I think the point you were making is really good. Like, I kind of thought to say maybe a better way to think of it is to say, like, there is a separation between political power and like the church, or the church, like freedom of religion means that there should not be a political power getting involved in the ecclesiastical or the liturgical aspects of worship. And that's where the separation is meant to be. But, the kingdom of God, it is made of people. And in a kind of interesting way, like as Americans, our power comes from the Constitution. It's based in we, the people. The people are the kings of America. And all we do is give our responsibility to our leaders. Like they don't have it unless we give it to them. And churches abdicate, or people within churches, when they present themselves as like these two spheres. As an American, you really can't do that. You're abdicating your spiritual, political responsibility. If you're going to be like an Anabaptist or something like that, like
I think there's something that's happening where, to Jacob's point earlier in the conversation about explicit hierarchy in society through religion, but also what in the United States, and this question of that, how much of the last, I don't know, because I don't have enough history, but like at least in my lived experience of presidents, it's like leave your religion at home and be a political figure. With Biden, Clinton, Bush, and less so with the evangelical Bush coalition that he was trying to do. Trump, there's no question. But what you see when you don't even have to squint your eyes, what you can see with what JD Vance is doing is something very, very different than what's been done in the past. And it's curious, because what does it mean to be a Christian political leader, as not just leave your religion at home, and but like what will that actually look like? And people will think it's Christian nationalism. I kind of look at it as just like, what does it mean to actually that be an explicit part of where you're coming from, and not trying to play a political game with where you're at? And I don't know if it's going to last. I don't know if it'll be true with him if he gets elected in 3 or 4 years. But it's like, I think it's curious in the future. We got here. OMG. Here it is. Rick Walker, how you doing, man?
Doing awesome. Christian, how are you?
Good. We got to connect a little bit at ARC. You've been paying attention to the conversation. You got anything you want to add?
Yeah. So there was a definition about power that came up a little bit earlier. I saw Luke made a great comment. It's this idea that power can never live with time. So there's the more power is dependent on time, that the less powerful the power is, the less right it is. And so in order for power to find its fruition or its true density, it must evict time. Jordan Peterson will put it in certain ways. He'll say that that which is destroyable is less real than that which is not destroyable, right? There's this corollary there. And so for power to increase, it must decrease the power of time and the thermodynamic impact of that. But for power to also gain its full strength, it also has to bring in truth and love. That's sort of the power. If you go back and you read Dante and you read some of the other folks from the 1300s all the way to 1600s, they're talking about the Trinitarian rights in power, truth, and love. They break up the Trinitarian figures in those three attributes often, and so obviously the power is the Father. It's the strength. It's the one that along with the Son, the Spirit, but also begets the Son before not temporally, but before that procedurally. And so in order to get power in its full efficacy, you must not only expel time, but you must also bring together the fullness of truth with a capital T and the fullness of love with a capital L in order to get it within the tradition, within not only the Christian tradition, but also within the eternal necessity of what it means to have sort of ultimate power. And all power that we see, that we think we see in Trump and other places, like Luke mentioned in the Constitution, it's derived from the image of God. It's derived back to the capital P power, that's truth and love all combined. And so that's sort of my spitball at what it means to have power, to be power.
Jacob, if you could pretend to.
I don't understand the word you said. What does that mean to expel time?
Well, and so every time that you or I have power, or Trump has power, or the people at ARC have power, it is always temporal. So power is only rented. It's never owned, unless you could somehow be the one being that's outside of time, or that controls time, is not affected by time. Then it's power. And so the more you follow power, it's either rented. The majority of the time, when we think we see it, it's rented from an ultimate source, which is God Himself.
But yeah, okay, so yeah, I mean, I think the verse in Deuteronomy, "Kochi ve'otzem yadi," you should not think that that my power and my the work of my hand made this wealth for me. Obviously, all actual power is representation of God in the world. But when you have, in Christian terms, the Christian magistrate, right, exercising power in the name of, and if he is truly following God, that's righteous power, right?
Yes. As long as I think this is the sort of the loophole with it, that if you want anyone that wants power never deserves it. This is kind of getting back to what you're talking about in a Deuteronomical type of perspective. But if you're a person that wants truth and love, then as soon as C.S. Lewis would say, you get power thrown in. That if you can seek ultimate truth and ultimate love, whether it be the Trinitarian version of those two, or you're actually seeking that in reality, that you discover the Trinitarian version of that, you get the power thrown in. So yeah, I right on, yeah.
Well, I'm not going to get into the Trinity, but I mean, going back to what Jesus said, right? The one who wishes to lead should be a servant of all. And yes, you have to use power in service. What I push back very strongly against, especially with Luke, is like he claims to be an anarchist, a Christian anarchist, and that sounds absolutely ridiculous to me.
I'll let Luke speak for Luke.
The funny thing is that when you were talking, Rick, what I kept seeing in my nerdy self was how those things are structured in the video game of Zelda. I don't know if you're much familiar.
Bro, it's been like 30 years. But yeah.
In the Triforce, it's like love, courage, and power, I think is I could be wrong on that, but and that they're in relationship to one another, and how those things, you know, if it's only one thing, if it's only power, then it's, you know, it's kind of bastardized from the proper relationship with the other things. And so yeah, it just was funny because there's also within the games, there's time travel, and so it's like the stuff you're talking about was encapsulated again, that comes from kind of like Eastern, there's some Eastern thought thrown in because the game came from Japan, you know, as much. And but anyways, you know, I was like, I'm just gonna go ahead and say it, even though it's not got the gravitas of like philosophy behind it. Was more of just an experience. But I do think, you know, these are the ways that we relate to and come into these ideas, and how we understand them. And yeah, it's definitely, I think the question of power related to Ark is a really good question, because that is a big part of what we're dealing with, like world powers within energy, power, you know, religious, and all these things. And there was even some of that. I mean, are you probably? Oh, I was thinking, you were at Ark, Rick, but
Like 2 hours, yeah.
for a couple hours. Yeah, but did you have any other thoughts? Vanderclay's piping in here in the questions. What are Rick's thoughts on Ark, even if you missed a bunch of it?
All right, Paul. Well, I shared a little bit of this with Paul after the event. So I was watching I think it was his last video, maybe about 30 minutes ago, about JVP's presentation. The thing that I noticed in the very first, in the initial talk that he gave the very first day, I was watching on a live stream trying to travel back and forth from Europe. I had to go back from Europe to Texas for a funeral, and then fly back to London for it. So I missed a lot of it, but I did see JVP's first speech. If you notice, he's sort of wondering, he's processing, he's not as articulate as he typically is. But if you notice, when he switches, I think it was from the third person to the second person, he gets a lot clearer. Just it's like a snap. And if you watch it, and so I think he was trying to communicate. Obviously, he's a superior communicator than I am, but it seems like he was trying to communicate from a different angle. And whenever he corrected it to his traditional lecture-like communication style, it seemed to get things to work a little bit better. But yeah, I want to see deeper dives. Like, I want to see Douglas Murray for an hour and a half. I don't want to see him for 20 minutes. I don't want to see the panels. The panels were, I mean, why do I want to hear 3 or 4 people give off the cuff comments? Or I know they're prepared comments, but they're really off the cuff, 2-minute excerpts. It seems to me that was not well thought through. Yes, that's right. That's right. When he's speaking to a specific person, that's absolutely right. And when he's in his zone where he says, think about your future and imagine what it would be. What question would you ask yourself? You would ask something like, and you name the question, what would you do if you knew you could not fail? You name these questions. He's talking to you conversationally.
So he didn't know who he was talking to at first.
That's right. That first talk he gave, he figured it out halfway through, and he switched the modality of this conversation to do that, and that's when it started clicking back for
him. So, and then I agree with you on the aspects of what would be more interesting is doing a live podcast where people click into, just like you were talking about Jordan clicking into that, knowing who he's talking to, would have been to see the right people having a conversation on stage for an hour and a half. And when they click into, I'm exiting talking points, I'm now into curiosity, and I'm now engaging in ideas, capturing that with 4,000 people, even it would have modeled how to just, you walk out of there and it's like all of a sudden you got real conversation. It would have just bled into real conversation after. I think that would happen. And then where I only saw that at Ark was in the conversations about AI. That's the only place I actually saw that take place from my perspective.
Yeah. And I mean, there were a lot of things. I know that I heard one or two of the speakers talk about the Muslim rape gangs. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that on your channel, but the R*PE gangs. And I actually bumped into Jordan, spent about 3 hours with him back in January in Washington, and that was my one concern is like, hey, you guys got to address this. It's the elephant in the room. Everyone's scared to talk about it. Someone needs to address it. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, they did act like we wouldn't know about it. But it's the most obvious thing. You're in the most despotic hellhole of a self-protective regime that sacrifices their own children so they don't get a fatwa against them in their own city, and they're allowing these immigrants to still in, and they're not willing to talk about it. I mean, I'm sure there are people that mention it. I'm sure there's conversations outside of the main platform about it, but it wasn't a central theme. It definitely wasn't a tertiary theme. But we were sitting in the middle of hell itself, with children. 130,000 kids in the same city probably have gone through this trauma.
Wow.
And it really wasn't addressed adequately from what I could tell. And that was the primary conversation that I had with him privately beforehand, back in January. That's what I wanted to see. Like, don't be afraid to bring up the topics we all know we should get. And I think there's a lot of this conversation that ARC is sort of meandering. We don't know what it's about or what it's for, and what's the purpose of it. We got these booklets, these papers. I think I heard someone talk about, maybe you did, Christian, that they handed out there about positions and that sort of thing. But my God, there's a real problem at hand. There's a handful of them, right? You've got these rape rings. You got this unmitigated immigration problem that everyone's scared to address, like right in your backyard, like literally within 100 yards of where the conference is being held. And then you also have, at the same time, if you guys remember, J.D. Vance came and spoke in Germany about the liberation of free speech being a primary concern for free peoples, and the German defense chancellor sniping back at him like the small, pathetic man he is. I mean, those are three worthwhile fights, and we walked away wondering, what the hell are we about?
Yeah,
so it was disappointing.
I definitely think that there was a little bit more of the free speech, because that's very deeply tied to the IDW stuff. I did see that sprinkled in as part of like, but landing specifically on specific things, it stayed, I said, in the rah-rah type, like level of like things. And you're talking about landing on some pretty specific things. And that's way beyond my pay grade of how to talk to that on a public level, as far as like with the powers that be. But, maybe that was one of the things that were missed. I do think that the more commentary people like Sargon and others, the podcasts, that they did talk more about the identity stuff related to, which is tangential to the immigration conversation. Ruben released a few of those recently, and I think some of that was addressed in there. But yeah, I mean, Douglas Murray saying get out of East London. I stayed in East London. And if you watch my vlogs and my Uber rides, many of the people I had Uber rides were like, oh yeah, I live right behind where you're staying. So you could do the math related to that. I did have interesting conversations though with two people that were probably Middle Eastern. One of them, well, they were Middle Eastern descent. One was a guy doing security at the very front of the Excel Center. He asked me directly, he's like, what is this ARC? I was just like hanging around at like after the conference was ending. And he's like, can I be a part of the ARC? I mean, existentially, that was like a wild, I wish I had the conversation, but he was also trying to keep like homeless people out of the thing. But I tried to explain what it was. I tried to explain, do you know who Jordan Peterson is? He said, it just looks like a lot of people that really are trying to do good things in the world. And I was like, you have no idea how actually it would be good if, that conversation, if, but who's going to talk to the security guy at ARC? And, that would actually be wild if that could have been captured. And then the other one was my trip from Heathrow to my hotel, which was about an hour long. I didn't realize. And the guy, we got into a conversation. He asked me my thoughts about Donald Trump, and then he asked me, and then it turned into a religious conversation. I don't know, somebody's scratching a lot. And the religious conversation turned into, I think Christians should read the Bible more and become more religious. And this was a guy who was Islamic. He's like, I want Christians to be more Christian. And I was like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. So, I think there's a big meta conversation, and then there's all these individual conversations. And the meta conversation is one that's very similar to the United States, related to, policy on immigration. That's actually an important conversation to have. But there's also good people trying to make it in the world, on the bottom side of that conversation, that are looking at ARC, wanting to know if they could come in to the ARC. I found that wildly fascinating. So.
Yeah. Oh, so I want to know, Michael, hey, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good to see you. I wanted to know what you thought were maybe the top one or two problems that an organization like ARC should be, this sort of this collective of Judeo-Christian-esque type of purveyors of ethics. What sort of problems should we be tackling, those of us that are in this space and kind of in this larger ARC Peterson space? What are the real global issues?
I don't know. Globally, I don't know. Well, probably something like what colonization was originally did, not in a bad way, but I think that just so much of the globalized economy set itself up in a way that made people so irrelevant, in their lives. I think, people need to be doing something meaningful for the majority of their day, even if it's not necessarily what's providing their income. So, that's, my thought in the, I actually saw something thinking about what all the problems are that people are bringing up with this way that it's doing it. And I thought what Paul was talking about, how important the format is actually a really key thing. And that's actually one of the areas where evangelical megachurches, they understand the importance of that. So I saw there was some clips on Ruslan's channel with a pastor here in San Antonio, and he was like, I didn't get to watch all of them, but I saw some of them addressing what how should churches prepare for if they lose tax exempt status, because right now so many of them are so dependent on that and being fully donation driven, and they are trying to work on basically entering into the marketplace and finding ways to create jobs and opportunities. And to me, that seems that's definitely something where the church needs to get over that sequestered mindset of your time of influence is on Sunday mornings, and they need to get involved in these in really the things that affects everyday life for more people. So,
Michael, talk about the Tecton School.
Yeah, I've mentioned it before. So I'm working on trying to do this kind of a thing of integrating trade apprenticeships with discipleship, and I'm thinking of it on the one hand primarily for young men who need a path to the future, for the majority that aren't going to college, but also really churches need men, and they need men that are competent problem solvers. And I think that embodied experience that you get with something working with your hands, even if you don't spend your whole career working in it, is so important. I talked to a guy the other day who works for a company that he just does caulking all day. But talking about there a lot of these companies, it used to be that somebody would start it and then they work their way up. They become the head of you start on the bottom, you work your way up. And when that was the case, the hierarchy was so much healthier, it made more sense, because if you had to move up organically in that way, you understood all of it. But now when you just have people going to college and getting a business, degree, and then they're going to the like management level, and it's a separate strata of people from all the, the regular employees, there's so many disconnects. And I see it in my company all the time. Like, the people that are making these big decisions don't understand some of the details on the ground. And so just having like a more, a broader exposure to all those things, I think would probably fix a lot of the problems that just the bloated bureaucracy tends to create.
In Paul's first estuary meeting that we had, there's a gentleman who works in healthcare. He's been on Paul's channel before, and he's asking this question of how do we get the people at the top to talk to the people at the bottom? How do we even make that work? Because I know from the capitalistic perspective they have different interests, but then there's the question of actually the common interest of making the whole business be better is actually in both of the interests at the end of the day. But figuring out how to have those conversations is very, very difficult. And I think part of what you're talking about with the people on the ground, being able to have conversations with people, figuring out, I think, something like a conversation protocol, something like us, where it could be helpful in the format of even like, where does that fit into the business structure? I mean, that's a great question to ask. So, but then the other thing that you're talking about, my brother, he worked, he was an engineer, graduated from Baylor, and then he got a job at Lockheed Martin, worked there for 5 years. And right towards the end of being there, as he's kind of entering into that level where he can get into management and whatnot, they instituted a new policy where basically to get to that tier of management, you have to get the quote unquote experience. You have to have X amount of experience, but you can't get that experience from within the company. So they're literally always going to be hiring from without. And in my mind, I just was like, get out of there, Joel. I was just like, get out of there, because that doesn't make any sense. I'm sure it makes dollars and cents, or it protects it continually, like you were talking about in the older models of business, where you could have had it where the blue collar worker actually lived in the same neighborhood as the CEO at some point in history, and that's all changed. And I'm sure Rick can speak to this from another perspective, but I just was like, what's the point of even that? The incentive, it's hard to even understand what the incentive to stay would be, because you have to leave to get the experience to maybe come back. But then it's like, what's all the valuable knowledge and information that comes from coming up from the bottom that makes for better understanding at the top? And these are systems that are pretty broken, I think.
Chris, Sam is backstage. Also,
sorry, he is. What's up, man?
I'm free.
was Peterson Academy discussed at all?
No, but I have a conversation coming up with a young lady who dropped out of school to specifically go into Peterson Academy that I met at ARC. So that'll be interesting. What's up, Sam? Do you have thoughts?
Hey, I really appreciated you helping us feel like we could be at ARC even if we weren't at ARC. I think that you did a really good job of that. So thank you for being a vicarious agent of many people's presence, or whatever the right way to put that is. To me, the best is what I can tell. I don't think that this is too unique to me. Is that I think that what ARC is that it's sort of like an anti-globalist globalization campaign or something like that. The Global Alliance of Anti-Globalists. And I wonder if that is a coherent identity. But I think what happened is conservatives in a lot of different places realized that, hey, all of the left wing of our countries has allied together and is getting all the same ideas from each other and implementing the same policies as each other. And there's this, global think tanky, Davosy industrial complex that's having a big effect on us that we don't really like. And so while the liberals were previously much better at networking across countries than the conservatives among different countries, it seems to me like what ARC is really trying to do is to be some sort of network influence, think tanky thingamajigger that connects up the conservatives in various different countries, most specifically the West.
How are you using the word conservative?
I get the right of center political parties. I'm maybe consider the previously the left wing or liberals. I don't know. I mean, at some level,
I know what you mean, but I think the use of the word conservative for what's going on is just a mistake, because a conservative is somebody who's just like, I'm fine going along with, like, just as long as things aren't too different, right? True conservatives, MAGA is not a conservative movement, right? ARC can never be conservative. You can't have, like, you can't have a group of people getting together to change things and call themselves conservative. That's
right. It does seem like the right and the left in many ways got mixed up and overturned, right? Like there was weird aspects of the right on the left and weird aspects of the left on the right. And that's been kind of a feature of our politics for a weird time. Like the rebels are in charge, like the baby boomer rebels are in charge, but they're still rebelling, but they have no one to rebel against, but they keep acting like they're rebels, even though they're actually the most powerful group of people. And, it's like the rebels in Star Wars became the Empire, and then the stormtroopers were then the rebels, or, something kind of weird like that. And so I agree with you that the conservatives are kind of now the people who are figuring out what the future should look like in a new and dynamic way. And the progressives are the people trying to hold on to what they've already accomplished. And so I agree with you that things are, but the left and right words still seem to mix.
Well, I think that there's a confusion because I don't think the progressives are actually liberal. So,
yes. Right.
So they're another form of conservative and or fundamentalist even. And so what you have, I think, with Peterson, when he's talked many times in the past about liberals are the ones that they're creative, and the conservatives are kind of like builders or something, like, engineers or whatever. And so I think that's what he's trying to, maybe there's some magic soup there that he's trying to make now with getting certain creative people with certain conservative people to try to build, the ARC or whatever, and whatever's new. And so, because the categories are messed up, the progressives are the progressives are as fundamental as parts of the conservative right. You see this with a lot of people that even religiously that were conservative, like fundamentalist, and all of a sudden they're trans or something now, or they're polycule or whatever. And like, well, what is that? They're grasping at all that they know, which are these kind of like rigid ideological realities. And I think what Peterson was trying to maybe do at ARC is take the creative liberal and partner them with the moderate conservatives in that coalition to build something.
Yeah. I think part of what got weird and mixed up is that I think left and right used to be a lot more sort of about openness versus high openness versus low openness.
Yeah.
And then what I think started to happen, especially over the last 10 or 20 years, is that left and right became much more feminine versus masculine, as opposed to open versus closed. And that's sort of why there's weird aspects of the right on the left and weird aspects of the left on the right, because our traditional categorizations that were based off of those sorts of things then became categorizations based off of gendered temperament. And I think that that's a lot of what's happening. And that, that there's something about ARC that's unleashing the masculine energy again, or something like that. The dragon energy of Kanye West and Donald Trump, that shared dragon energy that they have.
You sound like Mark Zuckerberg on Joe Rogan.
Yeah, I am referencing Mark Zuckerberg, right? He's the one who said that Facebook needs to have more masculine energy again. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's after he's done a couple of years of MMA, right?
Right. Yeah. But I mean, but there is something, I mean, just kind of pretty political about ARC. It does seem, very much like their action plans are at the level of political party success and policies and taxes and military strategic alliances and energy policy, which I'm not saying is bad. And I think that this, like Jordan Peterson's speech, which I think is getting sort of unfairly criticized, I would say. I think that there was a lot more in Jordan Peterson's speech than appeared obvious. But I think Jordan Peterson felt this tension, like I've got all these religious folks and I got all of these free market-y folks, and like, how am I supposed to make them dance together? And that's what his hedonism talk was about, was trying to find the common ground between classical liberal political philosophy and Judeo-Christian religious impulse, and sort of this, I don't know, allied against hedonism kind of thing seemed to be what he came up with. Although to what extent liberal capitalism is anti-hedonistic is a very open question. But I think, I mean, that's what he was trying to do. I saw what he was trying to do, and it wasn't a terrible attempt at it. And I don't think people quite got what he was going for.
I mean, I keep thinking that he's asking everyone to pick up your oar and row as a version of sacrifice. You know, and so it's I think that's everyone has to, like, has a part to play in this tapestry, but everyone has, man, there's a lot of big energy, to say it politely, in those rooms, to be like, I'm not, get in my boat, or whatever. And that is hard and complicated, and and he's trying. He's trying. I mean, this is the thing too. Like, what else is picking up the biggest thing that you can and carrying it across the room, to reference some of his early stuff? Like, I still think he's trying to do that.
Yeah, and he's trying to pick up the Western world, right? That's the thing, that's the burden he's currently trying to put on his shoulders.
What do you do with influence? What do you do with it? What do you just go away and let your ideas, float on into existence? I don't know. I mean, do you just write, or I don't know. Do you go back to teaching? There's obviously with what he's doing with Peterson Academy's related, but to that part of him. But then what do you do with the power that, that you've amassed? And it's hard. I don't know the answer. He's doing something.
Yeah. A lot of it also seemed to be vibe shift related. And like, I think I was tuning in and out to this conversation a couple times, but it does seem like America's way ahead of Europe on this front. I
was told that by a guy from Portugal, a young man, about 28 years old. He said, America's 3 years ahead now of Europe. And it's interesting when you're growing up in the West, and we were following all of Europe's leads, for the last however long I can remember, that has radically changed recently. I don't know.
And it does seem kind of like a daddy's back in charge sort of moment, right? Like, I mean, the parties, like I said, are getting more and more mapped to gender roles, as opposed to sort of agendered temperament roles. And it does seem like for a long time, the malevolent feminine or something had been ruling the roost, and that dad had been sort of zoned out on the couch watching TV and not really taking his natural place. And that there is something about a Trump that is, the daddy's coming home and he's cleaning house and he's upset about the place the state that he founded in.
And his name's JD Vance, and he spoke in Germany.
Well, is it Vance or is it Trump, right? And And there are weird aspects of the malevolent and the benevolent, father going on, and sort of like the kinder, compassionate role of the dad is more Vance-like, and the sort of chaotic, angry, you have to appease me sort of kind of masculine role is very much the Trump kind of role.
I want to get Michael. He popped up here in the chat. What do you got? What's going on with your mind?
So I've paid attention to as much as I can. Things have been a little busy for me, but what strikes me about ARC is that what's going on and the identity of that is best defined by who's not there. Right. So the people that aren't showing up there, and I also thought it was really interesting. I think it was McMo or something talking about how it was basically the nerds there. Right. So you have an intelligentsia at ARC. Right. But then like CPAC's going on at the same time. Right. And the same kind of people who in theory, from CPAC might have been at ARC, they're sort of like my dad with his Trump coins and his My Pillow guy pillow. Right. He's probably like paying attention to CPAC stuff. Right. Versus like a weird intelligentsia of people who may have like within the last 4 years moved across the aisle. That's kind of like what you're seeing at ARC. Right now, for there to be, I tend to take this in gratitude. Right. Whatever else is going on, any kind of alternative to the WEF stuff that was going on, any kind of like large coalition that isn't effectively communist, I'm here for it.
Well, it's interesting like McMo brought that up. I think it may have been on my live stream that I did from ARC. I can't remember. And the question of I kind of come to is like, well, then is the nerd spirit, was ARC more of a feminine spirit to a masculine spirit that would have been something along the lines of like CPAC, like you're saying? And what is that? Does ARC more represent I mean, you said it's the nerd, you had the tech bros kind of represented there too, but also with a spiritual thing, but then, Peterson coming from a meaning space, coming from a psychological space, people that have been transformed and impacted by him, either tacitly or significantly, that show up there are going to be operating on a different level than like where your dad's coming from, and so I think that's also was in the mix at ARC as well.
Last time, Paul Vanderklay's complaint was that ARC was too political, with the Speaker of the House speaking, McCarthy, I thought this time it would be more political than last time, and apparently it was far less political.
There were the aim about the big, from what I didn't go to the sessions on like energy and stuff, so I can't talk about that. And the Speaker of the House also was a part of the opening session at ARC this year too, which I enjoyed his talk. But the question about AI was pretty significant, and that is it wasn't like saying here's what it is. It was a live conversation of curiosity. So that was a poll, and Peter Thiel brought in a lot of religious relationship to that in his kind of thrust in his opening speech for AI in his conversation with Jordan. So the last time with Anya Hirsi Ali, it was and Jonathan. I mean, my perspective with Jonathan and Barron when they were talking, I felt last year there was a big religious conversation that came up, and then there was the Anya Hirsi conversation with Richard Dawkins that flow out of all of that, and I think even Tom Holland's stuff was much more alive in the conversation. So I didn't get that sense as much from the stage, but that's from not being there. Probably felt different being there and not being there. Rick, were you about to say something after Michael talked for a second? Were you about to lean in?
I was just going to tell Michael I like his Pajot paint. So I like it so much I actually have it right there.
Oh, nice.
Beautiful. Yeah. Texas represent. Let's go.
That's right. Love it. Hey, Christian, I've got to bounce, but enjoyed seeing everyone catch up a little bit.
Yeah, dude. Glad to have you, Rick.
right, you guys have a great weekend. Thanks a lot.
All right, man. All right, guys, we're coming up on 2:00. I don't know if there's any kind of like anyone wants to round anything out. I've been going for almost 2 hours, so I don't know. Any kind of thoughts?
I do think that ARC it understands that it can't just be merely political, that the political is downstream from, say, the narrative and the theological, and that it is trying to consciously shape that sort of theology and narrative and story, right? Tell a better story that will then cause the downstream effects onto the political that is sort of what it's going for.
Sam, what do you mean by political?
Yeah, I mean people who have been elected who are making policies, and those policies are enforced by policemen and judges and laws and taxes and stuff like that.
So when PVK is talking about polity, right? So let's say you have a binding. It's like here's the religious. Here's a binding of people. Now those people have to conduct themselves in some way, right? And so then there's polity, which is now that you're religio and you're bound together, how are you going to be bound together? And the polity is the enacting of how you're living together, right? Is it same page?
Yeah, sure.
So if that's the case, right, then like I don't think that you can get away from either of these things ever, especially with these kinds of groups, right? It is both completely religio of a binding, and it must by necessity have polity elements to it, right? And so but when people are talking about like it's not political or it is political, I think they're trying to say something like we're not trying to be adversarial to the other or something, right?
Invitation.
Or some sort of cheap level of partisan or something
Right.
like that.
Right.
You know what? Oh, keep going.
No, please.
What I was going to say is so there was something, and like I said, from not going to all the sessions, I missed this. Paul would have missed this. And I think it was mainly Philippa Stroud. Is that her name? Philippa Stroud. She was the one kind of coming out and trying to like paint the story. This is not in any of the speeches. It's the in-between speeches. I guess she would have been the one that was trying to tell the story of ARC from the stage. And it would be interesting if they kind of if they would release those pieces in mass. I don't know, because that was where they would give some like videos of people that were doing stuff at different places. And this was, again, I didn't capture this stuff. And then you would have had to go on to every session to maybe hear what that story arc was. But I think you're right, Michael, in saying that that you were, I guess, intuiting that they were trying to do that part of where Peterson said the postmodernists got this right, that everything's story, and narrative. And so I can't speak to that, but if somebody did attend every single session and kind of, I would be curious to hear if they caught what Philippa would have been like trying to weave through those in between sessions related to. So I don't know. I don't know if anyone could speak to that. I don't know if anyone went to all of this stuff, but
yeah, I got two random questions.
Yep.
So like, how does the normal guy off the street like participate in ARC, and like what good does it do for him?
Go to church.
He doesn't. That's the point. He doesn't. And this, so I keep on having PBK flashbacks. Not PBK, VVK, Vervaeke in this discussion. And one of the things that I remember when Vervaeke was on Grim Grizz, he said, Grim Grizz said, hey, how do you bring this down to the Walmart person? And Vervaeke said, I don't. That's not who it's for. Right? Again, this goes back to the thing of leaders and elites and people. Like, This isn't for everyone. This isn't the priesthood of all believers. This is Moses and Aaron.
That's it. Yeah, I think that there's leaders. Churches have, even Protestant churches have leadership retreats. Jacob.
Yes, because let's face it, being a Protestant is about lying.
Oh my God. Okay. No.
Hey, Christian, have you seen that map that I sent you?
I interviewed the guy on one of my.
Did you?
vlogs. Yeah, you can track it. Maybe day two. I think I interviewed him.
So
yeah, the culture wars.
Yeah, this culture wars map I think is really, really interesting, and I thought it was really interesting to look at that when I was thinking about ARC, right? And so, if for whoever hasn't seen it, right, you've got like all the podcaster people, and then you've got yeah. If you can blow that picture up a bit, I don't know how it'll come through, but in the top left of it, you can see a bridge. And then you can see a whole bunch of people crossing over the bridge, and that's where you've got Peterson leading, and it's coming from a little camp. There's little labels in the different areas. So this label for that area is there's a whole bunch of incels that he's leading across the bridge over to the other side where you've got Christianity and Peugeot's little faces on there. So there's little faces all throughout the map of all the different parts of the culture war. Like on the far left, you've got Yarvin and the Dark Tower thing. So this was really interesting to reflect on, to understand some of the moving parts, and you could probably map most of elements of ARC to the based, quote unquote, section of this territory, because they have it divided. There's a river in the middle of mainstream, and then you have base up top, and you have woke on the bottom, and the various elements. And I've traveled.
And no bridge across from.
Yeah. No bridge across.
Michael, what's your Twitter handle?
It's order and then chaos backwards.
I'm gonna have to figure out how to spell chaos backwards. I struggle with it forwards.
Here it is: ORDERSOAHC. Yeah.
All right. Okay. I was having trouble seeing that, the level of detail.
Yeah, it's awesome. My father-in-law was watching along, and he bought one. He thought it was awesome, and it really does tell a story. And when I interviewed I was just standing there looking at it. Jordan Hall was talking to this girl that worked for Unheard, and I was standing there, and I was videotaping, kind of talking about it. And the guy comes up next to me, goes, "Hey, I made this," and so I was like, "Oh well, let's talk about it." So you can track that down somewhere, but yeah, it really did. A lot of the players were there, that he walks through, that were in that thing, and if you've been playing in this corner of the internet for a long time, it'll feel nostalgic, actually, of looking at that image. So Jacob, Michael, y'all got any last things y'all want to share before we round this thing out today?
More talking on my channel later.
Which Michael? Who's talking on your channel later?
I said more talking. Anybody who wants to.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Jacob's going to keep going.
Yeah, I think kind of circling back more to the beginning of the conversation, it seems like there definitely is something with hierarchy and leadership and all these things, and I think that there's the change is supposed to be that there should be an understanding where the normal people don't want to be, there's things that they don't want to be in charge of, and they're grateful when things are working well that the leaders are taking care of the leadery things. But I think that there's we're currently going through a period of renegotiation between who gets to be in charge of what, and and this thing, I think maybe the format of having like conferences of this is analogous to like legacy media, which just becomes irrelevant, when the new platforms emerge, and so we just haven't discovered the new format for these sort of networking meeting things that really works for what people are trying to accomplish. Because it's kind of but it's part of the old elite, like which is even to say there's a group of people who would consider, like, the president of the United States and the richest person in the world not part of the elite. And it's like, if that's what you think, then your version of elite is going to, like, cease to be relevant for much longer.
All right, guys. Well, thank you everyone for making me feel virtually not alone today, doing the live stream. Obviously, I was trying to embody some Paul Vanderklay Friday-ish hangout stuff. So, or maybe not so obviously, but definitely. Just keep playing. Everyone keep playing. Pick up your row and oars. Peterson, that's how he ended up. Hopefully, I think that's what this corner, I think people are doing that in this corner. I think that is, people don't even know that they're doing it. And, but in some ways that's good. And then other ways become more conscious of it. So, all right, guys, I'm going to knock us out.
But why aren't we on this map?
Oh, why is Vanderklay not on the map?
Yeah, where's this little corner of the internet? We should have like an island somewhere at least,
or somewhere in proximity to Peugeot on there.
Somewhere in, I mean, we could be in like an island off the coast of Christianity or something like that. I feel like would be appropriate. Cheering on Jordan Peterson as he crosses the bridge.
I bet if there's a map in another 5 years, the corner will be on that map.
All right,
and I think because. Because there's a little bit of the corner that's a little bit anarchist, and there's a little bit of the corner that's a little bit anti-status and try to do. And so, like, the people that participate in that map, they have no problem with, some grift and some status and some, they played a different game. The corner is not playing exactly the same game. That would be my thing. So. Who knows? But I think that even if the corner's not playing that game but they keep playing the game we're playing, that it will show up, because I had a really interesting conversation thanks to Michael Sartori with Christianity on the Spectrum today. And he found, he identified the corner in 2018, and then he identified another variation of the corner in 2020 doing autistic data scraping of the internet. And it was really interesting so that's a little teaser that'll come out next week, my conversation with Christianity on the Spectrum. And it was wildly fascinating. I can't even describe how fascinating this
conversation with Jacob was really good. I was just talking to my mom about that the other day. In fact.
Yeah, Jacob,
his whole podcast is phenomenal. He basically did 9 years of research and then was like, now I will start. That's the level of thoroughness he's put into this. Now that I've studied this for 9 years, I can begin the podcast. So,
all right. Well, we'll end it with this. Paul Vanderklay says, "We are the clouds above the map." Thank you, everyone. Jacob's going to keep talking, keep just chatting. And I'm going to go unclog a sink. So anyways, we're going to end it with that. Thank you, everyone. And until next